I never thought a blind date could change my life. I only agreed because I was tired, because my friend begged, and because saying no felt harder than saying yes that night. If I had known who would be sitting across from me, I might never have walked through that door. My life had become simple in a way that left no room for dreams. I woke up before the sun every morning in Seattle, pulling on worn boots while the city still slept. The docks were cold, the air sharp enough to sting my lungs. I lifted crates until my muscles burned, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. At 32, survival was my only plan. Everything I did was for Grace, my 3.5-year-old daughter. Our apartment was small and tired, with peeling paint and a heater that rattled all night. But Grace did not see any of that. To her, it was home. She woke up every morning with a smile, tiny hands reaching for me like I was her whole world. Most nights I collapsed onto the couch with her curled against my side, her laughter filling spaces I did not know were empty. Love, romance, and hope felt like things meant for other people. I had buried those thoughts a long time ago. That was why Liam's call caught me off guard. He told me he needed a favor. He always did. This time it was a blind date he could not make. He wanted me to go in his place. I laughed at him, told him it was ridiculous. I was a single dad with no time, no money, and no interest in pretending I belonged in someone else's life. But he pushed. He always pushed. And in a moment of weakness, I agreed. I told him one thing. I was bringing Grace. He protested, but I did not care. If the woman ran the moment she saw me with my daughter, then the night would end quickly. In a strange way, that felt safer. Grace asked where we were going as I dressed her in her favorite blue dress with yellow flowers. I told her we were meeting a pretty lady. She giggled and asked if the lady was nice. I told her I doubted it. That made her laugh even harder. The city was glowing by the time we drove downtown. Grace hummed softly in the back seat, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I told myself this night meant nothing, just dinner, just a favor. That was when I saw her. She was standing by a yellow cab, her shoulders squared, her voice calm but firm as she argued with the driver. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose braid, catching the streetlight. She was not loud, she was not afraid. She was simply refusing to be pushed around. I should have walked past her. Instead, I stepped in. I paid the driver and watched him drive off without a word. When she turned to me, her eyes widened slightly. She told me she had it handled. She did not sound grateful. She sounded proud. She handed me a single dollar bill, worn and folded, and told me she did not like owing strangers. That caught me off guard. Most people would have smiled and walked away. She stood there, waiting, steady and sure. Grace leaned close and whispered that the woman was pretty. I told her not to get ideas, but something about the moment stayed with me as we walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. When I walked into the restaurant, the warm light hit my face and the smell of food wrapped around us. I scanned the room, already preparing for disappointment. Then I saw her, sitting at a small table in the corner. The same woman. She looked up, recognition flashing across her face. I stopped walking. My chest tightened. Of all the people in the city, it had to be her. Grace recognized her too. She smiled and announced it loudly, breaking the tension in a way only a child could. The woman laughed softly and introduced herself as Emma. Her voice was calm, confident, and warm in a way that made me uneasy. She knelt down to Grace's level and spoke to her like she mattered. Grace climbed into her lap without hesitation. That never happened. My daughter was cautious with strangers, always had been. I sat down across from them, guarded and unsure, watching as Emma held my daughter like it was natural, like she belonged there. Dinner unfolded in a way I had not expected. Grace talked, Emma listened. She laughed easily, wiped crumbs from Grace's face, and made her feel safe. She did not ask about my job, she did not look uncomfortable, she did not act impressed or disappointed. At one point, I tested her. I said I forgot my wallet. I waited for the pause, the look, the shift. It never came. She paid without hesitation, like it meant nothing. Not out of pity, not to impress me, just because it was simple. When we left the restaurant, I told myself this was where it ended. A woman like her lived in a different world. I watched her car pull away, thinking I would never see her again. I did not know yet that this was only the beginning. I told myself not to think about her. I said her name once in my head, then forced it out like it was a bad habit. Emma Collins belonged to a world I only passed through on my way to work. Glass buildings, quiet lobbies, people who never counted change before buying groceries. Still, she followed me into my days. At the docks, I caught myself staring at the water instead of the crates. At night, after Grace fell asleep with Bunny tucked under her chin, I sat in the dark longer than usual. I replayed small moments I had not meant to keep. The way Emma laughed when Grace mispronounced grilled cheese, the calm in her voice when she paid the bill, the look in her eyes when she listened, really listened. Grace did not forget her either. 2 days after the dinner, Grace asked if Miss Emma was coming back to read her a story. I told her Emma was busy. Grace accepted the answer, but she asked again the next night, and the next. That was when fear started to settle in. I had seen what hope did to people. I had lived it once. I knew how fast it could turn into loss. Emma had walked into our lives like a warm light, and I was terrified of what would happen if she walked out. So I did what I always did when something felt too good. I pulled away. I did not call her. I did not text. I told myself she would forget us, that she would move on, surrounded by people who fit neatly into her life. Men who wore suits instead of steel-toed boots. Men who did not flinch every time rent was due. But she did not disappear as easily as I hoped. A week later, I saw her name on my phone. Emma. My chest tightened. I let it ring. She left a message. Her voice was soft, careful, like she did not want to scare me away. She said she hoped Grace was doing well. She said she enjoyed the dinner. She said she would like to see us again. I listened to that message 3 times before deleting it. The next morning, I wrote her a letter. I do not know why I chose paper instead of a call. Maybe because words feel safer when you don't have to watch someone react. I told her she was kind, that she deserved someone steady, someone who could stand beside her without doubt. I told her I was just a father trying to hold his life together. I told her not to come looking for me. I did not say I was afraid. I slipped the envelope under the front desk at her office building and walked away before I could change my mind. My hands shook the entire drive home. That night, Grace climbed into my lap while I was folding laundry. She looked up at me with those wide eyes that always saw more than I wanted her to. She asked why Miss Emma had not come back. I told her sometimes people cannot stay. Grace nodded like she understood. She rested her head against my chest and fell asleep there. I sat still long after, listening to her breathe, wondering when I had decided that loneliness was safer than love. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Until one night, I noticed a new drawing on the fridge. Grace had drawn 3 figures holding hands. One was taller, with dark hair. One was smaller, with curls. The third had long yellow hair. Above them was a crooked sun and one word written in uneven letters: family. I stood there staring at it until my chest hurt. The next morning I could not ignore it any more. I took the day off and drove to the community center near downtown. I didn't know for sure she would be there. I just knew she volunteered somewhere with kids. I had overheard it at dinner. It was a small hope, but it was all I had. The moment I walked inside, I heard children laughing. I followed the sound down a hallway painted with bright murals. At the end of the room, I saw her kneeling beside a broken toy, her braid loose, her sleeves rolled up. She looked tired, real, not like the woman from the restaurant or the lobby. She looked up and froze when she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. I pulled the drawing from my pocket and held it out. My voice was steady, even though my hands were not. I told her Grace had drawn it. I told her my daughter had already chosen her. I told her I was tired of pretending I did not want the same thing. Emma's eyes filled with tears she did not try to hide. She told me she was afraid too, afraid of stepping into a life she didn't understand, afraid of hurting us, afraid of failing. I told her fear was not a reason to walk away. She stepped into my arms like she had been holding herself back for too long. I held her, feeling how real she was, how solid. For the first time in years, I did not feel like I was carrying everything alone. I thought that was the moment everything would finally make sense. I did not know yet that choosing love was the easy part. What came next would test everything we thought we were ready for. Love did not arrive with fireworks or promises. It arrived quietly, in small moments that felt almost fragile. Emma did not rush into our lives. She stepped in slowly, like someone learning the shape of a room in the dark. She came over on Sunday afternoons with books for Grace and groceries she pretended were extra. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, listening to Grace explain Bunny's entire life story with serious focus. Sometimes Emma stayed for dinner. Sometimes she left early. She never pushed. She never asked for more than what we were ready to give. That made it harder, because the more natural she felt in our small apartment, the louder my doubts became. I noticed how Emma paused when the heater rattled too loudly, how she glanced around when the neighbor's TV blasted through the wall. She never complained, but I saw it. I imagined her going home to quiet halls and clean lines, and wondered how long before our world felt too heavy for her. Grace, on the other hand, had no doubts. She waited for Emma by the door when she knew she was coming. She saved drawings just for her. She started asking if Emma would come to her school play. Not if she wanted to, if she would. One night, after Grace fell asleep on the couch between us, Emma stayed longer than usual. The apartment was quiet, the city light spilling through the thin curtains. Emma brushed Grace's hair back gently, careful not to wake her. "She's incredible," Emma whispered. "She is," I said. My voice caught before I could stop it. Emma turned toward me then, really looked at me. "You don't let yourself rest," she said softly. I shrugged. Someone has to keep things together. She reached for my hand, her fingers warm and steady. "You don't have to do it alone." That word again, alone. It scared me more than I wanted to admit. A few days later, the cracks showed. I was late picking Grace up from daycare because a shipment ran long. When I arrived, Emma was there. Grace was laughing, holding her hand. Emma looked calm, but there was something new in her eyes, concern. She said she did not mind. She said she was happy to help. But later that night, after Grace was asleep, Emma told me she had rearranged a meeting to be there. I felt something twist in my chest. "You don't have to do that," I said, sharper than I meant to. She frowned. "I wanted to. That's the problem. Your life shouldn't bend around mine." Silence fell between us. Emma sat back, her expression guarded now. "Is that what you think this is?" "I think," I said slowly, choosing words that already felt wrong, "that sooner or later you'll realize this is too much." Her voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. "You don't get to decide that for me." The words hit harder than I expected. We did not fight, we never raised our voices, but something shifted. A distance I had created settled between us. That night, I lay awake listening to the heater rattle, to Grace's quiet breathing from the other room. I told myself I was protecting her, protecting Emma, protecting myself, but the truth felt uglier. I was afraid of being left. A few days later, Emma invited us to her place. I said no. I told her Grace needed routine. I told her it was too far. I told her anything that kept us from crossing that line, from seeing too clearly how different our lives were. Emma did not argue. She simply nodded and said she understood. That hurt more than if she had pushed. The breaking point came quietly. One evening, Grace brought home a form from school, a family day, parents and guardians invited. She asked if Emma could come. Before I could answer, Emma said yes. I watched Grace's face light up, then looked at Emma. She was smiling, but there was tension in her shoulders. Later, when Grace was asleep, I told Emma she should not come. Her smile faded. Why? I said, because it will confuse her. And if you leave, I am not planning to leave, she said. You don't know that, I replied. That was when she finally looked hurt. I have spent my whole life choosing people and staying, she said quietly, but every time I try to choose you, you push me away. The words sat heavy between us. I did not stop myself this time. I told her she came from a different world, that she had options I did not, that one day she would wake up and realize loving us was a mistake. She stood, her hands shaking slightly. I can't keep proving myself to someone who refuses to see me, she said. She left without another word. Grace asked for her the next day. I said she was busy. That night I took the drawing off the fridge. I couldn't look at it anymore. The apartment felt smaller without Emma's presence, quieter in a way that hurt. Grace stopped asking questions for a while. That scared me more than tears would have. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Grace's school. She had fallen on the playground. Nothing serious, just shaken. They asked me to come. When I arrived, Emma was already there. She had been listed as an emergency contact. I stood there stunned as Grace ran into her arms. Emma looked at me over Grace's head. There was no anger in her eyes, just worry, just care. In that moment, I realized something I had been running from. Emma had already become family, and I was the only one still pretending otherwise. The school nurse explained Grace's fall in simple words. A scraped knee, a scare more than anything else. I nodded, thanked her, but barely heard a thing. My eyes stayed on Emma. Grace clung to her like she always did, small arms tight around her waist. Emma rubbed slow circles on her back, whispering softly until Grace's breathing calmed. She did it without thinking, without asking permission, like it was instinct, like it was love. When we stepped outside, the afternoon air felt heavy. Grace sat on a bench between us, swinging her legs, already smiling again. Emma finally looked at me fully. There was tiredness in her eyes, but no anger. I didn't mean to overstep, she said quietly. They called the first number listed. I swallowed. I put your name there. She searched my face, surprised. Why? Because when something happens to her, I said, my voice rough, you're the person she reaches for, and I didn't want to lie to myself about that anymore. Grace looked up at us. Are you mad at each other? Emma smiled gently at her. No, sweetheart. I nodded. No, we're not. But we both knew something had to change. That night, after Grace fell asleep with Bunny tucked beneath her chin, I asked Emma to stay. We sat at the small kitchen table, the light above us buzzing softly. I stared at my hands for a long time before I spoke. I've been wrong, I said. About you. About me. Emma waited. She always did. I spent so long surviving that I forgot how to live. I convinced myself that love had to hurt eventually, so I tried to control the ending. I pushed you away because I was scared of losing you." Her eyes softened, but she did not interrupt. "I saw the difference between our lives and let it define us, not because it mattered, but because it gave me an excuse to stay guarded." Emma reached across the table and took my hand. "I never wanted to save you," she said. "I just wanted to walk beside you." That broke me. Tears came before I could stop them, quiet ones, the kind that come from exhaustion more than pain. I squeezed her hand like it was the only thing keeping me upright. "I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want Grace to learn that love leaves just because it's hard." Emma stood and pulled me into her arms. I held her tightly, breathing her in, feeling something in my chest finally loosen. "I'm here, if you'll let me be." The next weeks felt different. Not perfect, just honest. Emma came to Grace's family day at school. Grace held both our hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Other parents glanced at us, but Emma never flinched. She listened, she laughed, she belonged. She did not change who she was. She still worked long hours. She still lived in her condo. But she also learned Grace's bedtime routine. She learned which stories made her sleepy and which ones made her ask for just one more page. And I learned to let go. Months later, we were sitting in a library on a Saturday morning. Sunlight poured through tall windows. Children sat in a circle on a colorful rug. Emma read aloud, using silly voices that made Grace laugh so hard she had to cover her mouth. Grace sat in Emma's lap like she had always been meant to. I watched from the back, my hands in my jacket pockets, my heart full in a way I had never known. This was not a grand love story. There were no sweeping gestures, just presence, just choosing each other again and again. When the story ended, Grace ran to me, eyes bright. "Miss Emma made the panda hiccup," she said proudly. I lifted her up and looked at Emma. She was watching us with that quiet smile that had changed everything. "I used to think loving someone meant risking everything," I said as we stood together. "Now I know it means building something, slowly, honestly, with the people who stay." Grace wrapped her arms around both of us. "We're a family," she said, like it was a fact. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "Yes, we are." And standing there in that quiet library, with my daughter laughing and the woman I loved beside me, I understood something at last. Love did not come to save us. It came to grow with us. And this time, I was ready to choose it.